This is Jason Clemmons, Doctor of Chiropractic at the Rock Health and Wellness Center, and this is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC, on this Tuesday, January 28th, right here from the Rock Health and Wellness Center studios in Lubbock, Texas, and on 98.7 and 1420 AM, Walk by Faith Radio, 987radio.com. We're on Facebook at the Rock Health and Wellness Centers. We're on YouTube at Health from the Rock, and we're on X at Jason Clemmons, DC, and we'll soon be on the Walk by Faith Facebook page as well. So you can, if you want us, you can get us. And it's such a kick in the teeth when every single day I answer the same questions over and over again with people who just won't watch the show. I know you guys watch the show. Y'all are getting so smart. Y'all might need to start teaching this stuff to other people, because it's like so simple. It's like so simple. Some of the things that I had the same conversation today. Had a guy tell me that he had gout. Good dude, I like him a lot, but he had gout, so he went to the doctor. They gave him a steroid, and now he feels 30 years younger. He just feels so good. He's got all kinds of energy, but he knows he can't stay on steroids all the time. So he was asking me, what should he do? Right? And it was a genuine question. And he's a genuine guy. No problem with any of that stuff. Right? But I was like, are you taking fish oil? And he's like, nope. And I was like, well, a steroid is an anti-inflammatory. So it's blocking the COX inhibitors from taking arachidonic acid to prostaglandins. What else does that? EPA, right? It's like, come on now. We got an opportunity right here. We've got an opportunity to make those transitions like we were talking about last night when we took health to church. And it's just like, I don't know what, it's like, it's my own fault. I don't blame it on anybody but myself. I got to get better. I got to get better at marketing and promoting and getting attention and all that stuff. Just because we got the answers to some of the problems. We don't have all the answers to all the problems, but we got some of the answers to some of the problems, and people just don't pay attention. So that was disheartening today. There's some of those conversations that I had. I was like, do you watch my show? And he's like, no, I forget about that. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, every night from 6 to 7, right here on all these channels, we're coming to you. So, hey, last night we had a really good Take Health to Church show. So if you missed it, go back to our Facebook page, go back to our YouTube channel or our X, and check that out. It was a really good show. I think it was might make a difference in your life. And it led me into another conversation I had 2 or 3 times today. I think we ought to make a pact with each other, and we ought to say to each other that we are no longer, now that we know that there's a transformation going on inside of us, inside and through us, right? We got this Holy Spirit working on us, inside of us and through us. How can we answer the question, hey, how's it going today? And we say, same old, right? Like same stuff, different day. Oh, just regular old day. Nothing special going on here. Don't you think that's crazy? I mean, if you really actually knew that the Holy Spirit, like Jesus came and said, I got to leave because if I don't leave, the counselor won't come back to you. And so you got to, I'm going to go, but I'm going to be up there with God, and I'm going to send you down the Spirit, and then he's going to guide you through the rest of your life. And he's just going to transform you into this glorious thing at the end. Like it's constant level of maturity that we're going through. You would think that we might just understand that this transition phase is a lifelong phase. It's everyday phase. And what's happening in me today, the Holy Spirit is transforming me into this glorious being. Same old. Yeah. No, sir. No, it's not the same old. It's not. It's a transformation that's happening with me today. Like, I cannot wait for the day. I can't even wait to go to sleep tonight so I could get up tomorrow and have another day. Like, I can't wait to go to sleep tonight so that the transformation that's going to happen in the middle of the night happens. And then I get up tomorrow and I'm like, well, okay, I'll just get up tomorrow and just just be ready for the transformation. I'll get my body ready. I'll get my cells ready. I'll make sure that I get the right nutrition. I'll get some exercise. I'll get my sleep. I'll be ready for it, and then I'll just be ready for that transformation. I know you guys that are listening to the show right now. And if anybody out there in social media land ever watches this show tonight, I know that you guys don't wake up and say that same old thing. I know you guys are the ones that are out there killing it and getting after it and making the world a better place and shining your light out there. So thank you for all you do. But just remember that. Remember that. If you're new, if you just tuned into the show, go back to the beginning and watch the beginning, because man, there's no reason for us to be saying stuff like that. It doesn't even make any sense. Like, man, let's get some enthusiasm going on today. Let's see if we can enjoy this thing. Like let's transform a little bit. We should get some T-shirts made up or something. The Transformers, right? Okay. So tonight, I'm so excited about this that I'm probably too excited, and it's probably going to be a little bit of a letdown, which is going to be the transformation. It's going to be a process, right? That's working through us. But you guys know how much I appreciate the work of Dr. Robert Lustig. And if you don't know that, I appreciate the work of Dr. Robert Lustig. I have had his at the Rock Health and Wellness Centers, the rockhealthandwellness.com, one of my websites. I've had his Sugar the Bitter Truth video on there since 2009, I think 2009 or 10. I think it's 2009, and I've just learned so much from Dr. Lustig, and I've tried to watch him every chance I get. And sometimes he'll do like conversations to regular people, and then sometimes he'll do conversations to doctors, and he gets really into it. And he wrote this book, and for the hacking of the American mind, the science behind the corporate takeover of our bodies and brains, by Robert Lustig, MD. And so, well, I just happened to come across a video last week, and I didn't even know I was missing out on this video, actually. But I found it, and let me see if I can get the name of it here, because I've watched several since then. But yeah, it's sugar, metabolic syndrome, and cancer. And I didn't even know it was on. And it was this was 4 years ago. It was like during COVID. COVID just started. And he's talking. This is on the Low Carb Down Under site on YouTube. So if you're interested in that type of thing, it's a great site, Low Carb Down Under, and they do a great job of it's about bringing together people with an interest in low carb nutrition, and that's it. And I guess they're from Australia. They have 77.9 million views on all of their videos, and so they got some cool stuff, right? So I guess they got Dr. Lustig to go down there and talk to those guys, or go somewhere wherever he was. They did it. And the answer, the name of it, it says Professor Robert Lustig, Sugar, Metabolic Syndrome, and Cancer. And so I didn't even know, or I didn't remember that I knew one or the other, and it's basically the same thing. That's kind of like it's 25 degrees outside, but it feels like it's 15. And it's like, no, it's just 15. It's like, if it feels like 15, it's 15 to me. I don't really care what it really is, because that's irrelevant. And that's the same thing that happens. I don't really know if I knew this video existed and forgot. Either way, I never knew it existed. I just found it this weekend. And he gets into it and breaks down the difference between glucose and fructose. And then he gets into at the very end of it, he gets into a little bit of cancer, which is really disappointing. And I might have to try to find it again to see if I can find it, and see if he'll talk about cancer a little bit more in depth. And maybe someday we'll have him on the show, that if he'll if he would ever want to talk to me about stuff like that. But um, I'm just going to go through. I love doing stuff like this. I just started. I came in on Saturday, went and got me a coffee, and one thing that I've kind of learned a little bit, and I don't even know if this holds up and it's true, but used to I just needed time. I think I might have said this the other day. Used to I just needed time in the day to get something done, and I've noticed at 54 that I need time and energy. I used to not need energy. I just had it all the time. But now I have to match up my free time with my energy. And it's a little bit more complicated to do that because there's sometimes I have time, but I don't have any energy. And so I'm just like, whatever. So on Saturday, morning times are the best. So I got up, got me some coffee, came up here, locked myself in the building, and I broke down this video. And it was, I don't know how many pages of notes I've got right here. 7 or 8, 9, 10 pages of notes that, and I broke down the video. So I want you to know, first of all, this is Robert Lustig's stuff. This is his video. It came from that video that I just told you about on YouTube from Low Carb Down Under. It's not my stuff, but it's not really his stuff either. So he either read it or figured it out or something. But that's what we're going to go through. So it's not going to be, it may not be clear. I mean, it may not be, I don't know. It's not put together is what I'm saying. It's a little raw. This whole thing's a little bit raw, but I think if you'll stick with me, you'll learn some stuff over it. And I'm just going to go tonight. I don't even know. We may finish it. I doubt it, but we'll go through it and we'll talk about it. Now, some of it's going to get a little complicated. There's some biochemistry, and you guys know if you've been watching very long, I'm not a biochemist. Okay, there's a lot of stuff that people know out there that's a whole lot deeper than the things that I know. So fair enough. That's what do you say? That's my if I have anything to declare before we start. I'm not a biochemist, and so what I'm trying to do is teach, and I'm trying to teach you that there's a way to be healthy and there's a way to be sick, and there's things that might move you in those directions. And if you're sick and you want to be healthier, or if you're healthy and you want to be healthier, then you might want to understand some of this stuff. And I know you're busy, and I know you got a lot of things on your mind, and you got a lot of things to do, but we're just going to walk through it anyway. You got an hour. Just dedicate this hour, 45 more minutes. Dedicate this next 45 minutes to just try to say, okay, teach me something about this. Okay, so we're going to go through the notes and we're going to talk about them, and I'm going to show you some slides and some things, and we'll just see how it works out. Okay, so it's coming from Robert Lustig, MD. Obesity and cancer. So he starts off and he makes this point, and he says, look, 50% increase in cancer with obesity. If you have obesity, you have a 50% increase in cancer. And cancers are associated with obesity are endodermal. So in the very beginning stages of life, the embryology of life, the sperm and the egg meet and they fit together. We've talked about that before. And then they start to divide, and the one cell becomes 2 cells, and then they'll become 4 cells, and then 8 cells, and then 16, and 32, and 64. And all of a sudden you got this little ball there. And then it starts to, on day 13, it starts to differentiate, and it starts to become 3 different layers of cells. 3 that, and they're called endoderm, ectoderm, and mesoderm. And those 3 cells, when they differentiate, for the next 9 months or whatever it is, those cells are turning into different types of cells. So your ectoderm cells are going to be like your skin. It's good. The epidermis of the skin, sweat glands, hair follicles, the epithelial lining of the mouth and anus, the cornea, the lens of the eye, the nervous system, sensory receptors in the epidermis, adrenal medulla, tooth enamel, epithelium of the pineal gland, and pituitary gland. So that's your ectoderm. Okay, then your mesoderm is going to turn into skeletal system, muscle layers of the stomach and intestine, excretory system, circulatory and lymphatic system, reproductive system, your skin. Okay, then your endoderm is going to turn into the lining of your digestive tract, your lining of your respiratory system, your urethra, your urinary bladder and reproductive system, liver, pancreas, thymus, thyroid, and parathyroid gland. Okay, so tonight, what we're going to talk about, what we're saying here, is that, and it's not, that's just a little background right there. The three layers, that those germ layers they call them, but the important thing is this: we're talking about specific cancers, right? Cancers associated with obesity are endodermal: prostate, colon, lymphoma, esophagus, stomach, liver, pancreas, kidney, and leukemia. So it's like, okay, that's kind of narrows some things down. And it's like, I thought that was great knowledge. I didn't know that. I didn't know that was, it's you're not mesodermal and not ectodermal. You're not going to get bone cancer from being obese. You're not going to get skin cancer from being obese. It's not in the same germ line. Okay? What you're going to get is prostate, colon, lymphoma, esophagus, stomach, liver, pancreas, kidney, and leukemia. So those are the ones that we're talking about right there. And so this adipose tissue is a storehouse for toxins. That's what your fat does. Your fat will store toxins inside of it, okay? Estrogen synthesis and metabolism, oxidative stress, and reactive oxygen species, which is your free radicals. And then hyperinsulinemia, where you have too much insulin in your blood. So obesity has increased. Listen to this stat right here. Obesity has increased from 1975 to 2015 by 2.78% per year. That comes from the Lancet in October in 2017. Obesity has increased from 1975 to 2015 by 2.78 per year. But diabetes has increased from 1980 to 2014 by 4.07% per year. Obesity went up 2.78%, but diabetes went up 4.07%. Almost double. Not quite double, but almost double. It's like, wait, hold up a minute. Yes, we got 25% increase in the obese, but we've got 25% increase in normal weight people. We think that obesity means you're sick, and it doesn't. Obesity doesn't mean you're sick. It increases your chances of being sick because it might put you in a category that has a higher percentage of people that are sick. Let me read this next stat for you. This was done, when this stat was done, there's 240 million adults in the United States. 72 million are obese. That's 30%. And I thought that number would be higher. I don't know exactly when that was registered. But it says 30% of people are obese. 72 million people, okay? Of those 72 million people, 80% of those people are obese and sick. That's 57 million people. So if you're in that category and you've got too much weight on yourself and you're carrying around this obesity, then there's an 80% chance that you are. And it's like, okay, well, that's logical, I think, because it's logical because what caused me to be obese? Well, more than likely, the things that cause me to do that are the things that make me sick. There's a few people, 20% of those people are not. They're not. And there is an MHO, metabolically healthy obese, is what that stands for. So 20% of the 72 million people will live a normal life. They'll have a normal age when they die, and they have normal telomere lengths, which is the end caps of your chromosomes that determine how many cell divisions you can have. And all those things are normal. So you can have a large person that lives out a normal life. Okay? 20% of those people are going to do that out of this group that we have that's obese. 80% of them are obese and sick. Fair enough, okay? But listen to this stat. There's 168 million people, 70% of the population, that are normal weight. But of that 70%, 40% of those normal weight are diabetic and sick. 67 million. You got 67 million people who are diabetic and sick, and they are normal weight. And we know some of those people, right? We know some people that they're not obese, but they got diabetes and they're sick too. And it's like, wait a minute, how can that be? Then that's Dr. Lustig's teaching in this whole thing, is how can that be if we have 40% of 70% that are diabetic and sick, but they're not fat, they're not obese. But it's because of the way that they're getting their calories and the type of calories that they're getting and what's going on in the liver. And that's the thing that we've been trying to talk about, because Dr. Lustig has talked about sugar, the bitter truth since 2009. And we've talked about it multiple times on this show, right? We've talked about the splitting of white sugar into glucose and fructose. And we talked about it last week, I think. We're just about how there is a difference in glucose and fructose. And that's what these next few shows are going to be about. I don't know, maybe this show and tomorrow, whatever, but there's a difference right here. And if you get this, you can manage your life better. Okay? Why is this so important, and why am I so excited about this? Because you can manage your life better. You can determine, you can have some power into your future. You can start to understand a little bit about how you can help yourself and your children if you'll just understand the difference between these two things. Because they are not the same. They are one of them is used by every cell in our body. One of them goes to our liver. They're not the same. One of them is fuel and one of them is poison. It's toxic. Okay, and that's what we're going through right now. So what Dr. Lustig says is obesity is not the problem. It's not the problem. It is it's what's going on in the cell, and that is the issue. And ultra-processed foods, as we know, are 60% of our diet, okay? And most of that, the 62% of the calories of our diet are ultra-processed food, and 3/4 of that is sugar. And why would they put sugar in it? Because when you ultra-process food, you take all the nutrients out of it, and it tastes like crap. So you have to put sugar in it to cover up the nastiness that you... it's like this morning Leslie was trying to try some coffee or something, and she just tried some regular blonde roast coffee, and she was like, yuck, that's horrible. And I'm like, yeah, you got to sweeten it up with a little bit of stevia or something, right? That's the only reason some of us drink all these drinks anyways, just to get the sugar. So they did a study, a group at UT Knoxville, cumulative effect of sugar. And what they did is they took all of the receipts. Now, I don't know how they pulled this off, but they took all the receipts for all the fast food restaurants for, like, I don't know, Dr. Lustig said like 30 years or something, some statistics that was just like unbelievable, really. I was like, how did they come up with that? But apparently they did. And they took this time frame where we've gained all this weight and we've increased our obesity, and they looked at it and they said, okay, what was it in the restaurants that might be contributing to this obesity? And they're like, was it the hamburgers? Was it the French fries? Or was it the Cokes, the sodas? And what they found out was that in this diabetes, obesity, insulin resistance thing that we got going on out there, what they found out was it's in the sodas. It's in the fructose is what drove all that sort of thing. It's the soft drinks that were causing that. And then Dr. Leslie points out, he says this: the soft drink companies know the answers to this is true, and because they know that it's true, they don't like it. And why would they? Like, when you bring it up, they're not going to like that. So they're going to do some research of their own. And what he said was 5 out of 6, if the food industry did the research, 5 out of 6 times the research says that there's no problem with fructose and soft drinks and high fructose corn syrup. But if an independent funded company does the research, 10 out of 12 times it says yes, there is a correlation with these two things, with having the fructose in your drinks. That's interesting, right? 5 out of 6 times if the food industry does it, then it says no problem. 10 out of 12 times if an independent company does it, it says yes, there is a problem. And so his point was this. He said, look, the literature is all messed up. And so they throw all this literature in there, and now it messes up the waters, and so now they can have an argument that it's not good for you. And when we get back, we got to take a break, but when we get back, we're going to start to break down some of the biochemistry of it, and I'm going to show you how eating glucose is different than eating fructose inside your body. And so stick around with us, and we'll be right back right after these messages. While we got them on a break, we'll just kind of talk about this slide right here a little bit. That's what white sugar is right there. This is white sugar. And your body is going to just break that bond between that as soon as it gets to your gut. That's what this little enzyme called sucrase does. And now what you got is you got two different substances, and I'm going to show them to you in just a second. I'm going to show you the structures of them. I'm going to show you why they're different and how they're different and why they're metabolized different, and then what they actually do in a cell that's different. But this is what happens. And so now this is going to go to the liver, and this is going to go to all the cells to try to make energy, and we're going to try to get all that fructose out of the system. And I'm going to show you how the regulation of fructose in the liver is almost nothing. There's no stopping it. Once it gets to the liver, it just flows through the system, and then all of a sudden we're overloaded. This causes overload. And you get overload in your liver, and you'll end up with fatty liver disease and triglycerides. Your triglycerides will be high. You'll have all kinds of issues. And by the time we're done with this, I'm really hoping that you'll think about it again. And what are some of the things that you need to think about, right? Sodas right there. That's one of them that you're going to get fructose from. Obviously, your candies, any of your Pop-Tarts or your cereals or your Frosted Flakes. That's what's disgusting about Frosted Flakes. Like, are you kidding me? Like, grown people feeding children corn flakes with sugar all over them? Like, that ought to be against the law. But sodas are number one. The second one that people don't really realize is juice. Juice is fructose. And so you got to understand that's the same stuff, right? Well, I think I'm healthy because I drink apple juice. I think I'm healthy because I drink orange juice. Nope. It's fructose. We got to learn from it. I'm not trying to throw stones at the companies that make it. I'm trying to say that we if we really want to start to understand it, we probably should try to understand it. Hey, y'all, we're back. This is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. We're breaking down Robert Lustig's video talking about sugar and cancer and all kinds of problems, right? So this is the way that were taught in school, and uh, this was his actual little diagram that he taught in school about if you were just taking a regular physiology class, you might see this right here, and it's like it's a fat centric idea. It's that the reason that you're sick is because you're fat, and um, I could tell you it's not an effective way to talk to a person who's fat, right? All of us who have extra weight on ourselves, when someone tells you that your life sucks because you're fat, that you're just you all of your problems in the world are because you're fat, like you're just fat, and then because what I heard my whole life was, and it was my own inside transformation that was taking place, not anybody else's fault, but what I heard is that you're a lazy punk, worthless fool. That's what I heard. That it's like I heard that every time, and it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. And this process right here is this idea that fat is the cause of the problem in the body, and it's like what's happening is the fat is releasing these cytokines. Remember we talked about cytokines, these chemicals that communicate inside the body. We talked about that with inflammation lots of times. Um, that the fat is the TNF alpha and interleukin 6. Those things are being driven by the fat into the liver, and it's causing the liver to become insulin resistant. Because I'll show you how in just a second. But now the liver becomes insulin resistant, which now causes the um, the liver to increase its output of glucose, because that's regulated inside the liver. So now your liver is kicking out too much glucose, which is now increasing your blood sugar. And then that's going and causing your insulin to go up. And then the insulin is driving more energy into the fat to try to get it out of the bloodstream and into the fat. And then now you got into this vicious cycle, right? We got this cycle going on that is just, it's just a mess, right? And that's what we're taught. And then after this starts to happen, now because the liver is increasing the output of glucose, that means your insulin is going up, which we're calling hyperinsulinemia, which is too much insulin in your blood, and then that derives peripheral insulin resistance. And then that gets your muscles involved. And then your muscles, because of the type of receptor that your muscles use to absorb the glucose, now your muscles don't work, and then we're in trouble. Right? Now we've got more insulin production and we're in trouble. And when we've done our Eating for Health class since 2009, there's a slide on our Eating for Health class that says that the fat cells, then the muscle cells, and then the liver cells all become insulin resistant. And this is exactly kind of what this is saying. The more insulin we have, it then eventually will become insulin resistant. And what Dr. Lustig says is that this process right here happens in about 10% of the people. It does happen. It's not necessarily wrong, but it does happen, but it's only in about 10% of the people. But one of the things that we could take from this is we could look at this slide and we could say to ourselves, okay, wait a minute. Insulin is related. If we just were simple and we just said, okay, insulin is related to muscles, like muscle intake of glucose. Muscles use sugar, like glucose, yes. Muscles use glucose. So the more muscles we have, the better we control our blood sugar. You got 605 muscles that I can muscle test in the office. There's more muscles than that. But in a lot of, you got all kinds of muscles in your tongue and all kinds of stuff, right? You got 605 muscles that if you came to the office, we could muscle test them. I'd have to cheat and use my book if I was going to use them all because I don't have them all memorized. But you've got that right there. So the volume of that muscle, the size of your bicep, the size of your quadricep, the size of your hamstring. The more muscle that you have, the more glucose you can regulate in your system. That's why it's vitally important to get muscle on your frame. It's vitally important to lift weights. Doesn't matter how old you are, especially if you're old. If you're middle-aged, it's vital right now that we get muscle on our frame. Because at middle age, you're gonna end up you're gonna end up being old if you're lucky, right? So you need to make sure that you've got muscle on your frame. How do you get muscle on your frame? You lift weights, and you lift heavier weights than what you have. Like like you need to put some. It's I don't need to just lift pencils. I don't need to do that. I need to add some weight to it. Now, you don't have to get crazy. You don't have to go overload it with weight, but that's the way that you build that. You fire the brain. You make the brain fire the muscle. You make the muscle get bigger, and the brain says, I better build the muscle because this dude's going to lift more weights. And if you increase your muscle mass, then you will increase your ability to decrease your blood sugar, and you won't have to deal with this process as much. You won't be as fat, and you won't have as much insulin in your bloodstream, and you won't be as apt to become insulin resistant if you have more muscles. So it's just one thing we can learn from this one particular slide. Okay? So that's the story that's taught in school, but that's not really it. 50% of the population, it's different. So Dr. Lustig will say, okay, this happens in 10% of the population, but in 50% of the population, that is not where it happens. It starts in the liver. It starts in the liver because the liver becomes insulin resistant. Prior to 1980, it was only alcoholics who had fatty liver disease. Now it's 5-year-olds. Used to, cirrhosis of the liver and fatty liver disease happened in alcoholics, and everybody knows that. Oh, Uncle Joe, he drank his whole life, and he died when he was 55 when he had his cirrhosis of the liver, right? We knew that. We knew that was an alcohol problem back in the day. But now all of a sudden we've got it, and it's getting out of control. And non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and metabolic syndrome are the same. And we broke down metabolic syndrome last week. But non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is a problem. And if you're Latino, there's a 45% chance. There's a 45% of these people that are dealing with fatty liver disease. You have a higher chance if you're Latino. And it has to do with genetics. There actually is a little bit of genetics right there, but it doesn't mean you're going to have it. It just means that you're more prone to having it, okay? 33% in Caucasians, 24% in African Americans, 5.5% of adults. And then here's a statistic, okay? In obese autopsies, in people that die who are obese, 38% of those people, 38% die with fatty liver disease. But listen to this stat right here. 13% in children 5 to 19 years old. 13% of the children who die between the age of 5 and 19 years old have fatty liver disease. And that's 100%, 99.9% avoidable. It shouldn't be happening at all. It shouldn't be happening, but it is happening. And it's because this little picture that I got is really not, it's not the case. And we just have personal experience of this in my house because this is how Leslie's dad died. Leslie's dad died from cirrhosis of the liver, fatty liver disease, secondary to diabetes. I have lived this process out inside my own home. I've seen it happen. I've watched it happen. I listened to all of the doctors all the way along the way. I listened to his trip to the Roswell doctors and then his trip to the Scott and White doctors in Temple, then his trip to the Baylor medical doctors, then his trip upstairs to the Baylor medical cancer doctors, all of them, all the way through. I've listened to this process right here. And did they tell him the truth? And did they tell him how he's got to solve his problem? They did not. And it'll get you, because this next stat right here, 1 out of 20 with liver fat end up with this this liver disease, which is liver disease and inflammation together. I can't say the word. Steatosis, steatosis, hepatitis. I don't know how to say that word. Liver disease and inflammation. 1 out of 20 with liver fat. If your liver gets fat, you're going to have a problem. Okay? 25% will develop cirrhosis and will die if they don't get a transplant. That's what they told my father-in-law. He said the only way you're going to live is if you get a transplant. But then if you get cancer, which I'm going to show you before this whole thing is over, if you get cancer, you get kicked off the liver transplant list. If your medical doctor tells you that the only way you're going to live is to get a transplant, and then they tell you, we found a spot of cancer and you're no longer allowed to have a transplant, that's a depressing day right there. It's visceral fat versus liver fat. 45% of people have fatty liver disease. And there's two ways that we can get these fatty acids. We can have non-systemic fatty acids, or we can have systemic fatty acids. Non-systemic is where we're going to create them in our liver. And then the other one is from our adipose tissue, glycolysis, where we break down glucose, or from our diet. Okay? So now let's look at how we process inside our body, how we process glucose in our liver. All right, I'm just going to get rid of this one. This is regular metabolism. Okay, and let me change the screen just to see make it a little bit bigger. Maybe you can see it. I'm just going to walk through it. It's going to be complicated in its biochemistry. And I've already told you guys, I'm not a genius biochemist, okay? But I can see the picture. I can see it enough. And I think if we walk through it enough, you'll see it too. And maybe we'll have to walk through it a bunch of times, okay? But here's what happens. First of all, you've got this first pass that happens, and when you eat white bread, let's just say you ate a sandwich. You ate a ham sandwich. You ate white bread and some ham, and that's it. No mayonnaise, no mustard, no nothing else, just white bread and some ham. Okay, the white bread is glucose. It's not fructose, unless it's not really true, because if you go to the grocery store and you look on the package, there's so many packages of bread that have high fructose corn syrup in them. But let's just pretend for a second that you could get some bread, which you can if you really work at it. You can get some bread that it's just glucose. Okay? So now you're going to take this glucose and you're going to ingest it into your bloodstream. And it's going to go into your gut. It's going to go into your digestive tract. And when it goes into your digestive tract, it's going to be transported through the gut, through the lining of your intestines. It's going to be transported, and 80% of those calories are going to be spread out to your whole body. So let's say it's 100 calories, just to do easy math. There was 100 calories in your sandwich that was glucose. 80 calories right there is going to be spread out. Your brain needs what? Glucose, oxygen, and excitability. Right? Your brain needs those three things. So your brain's going to use glucose. All your cells, your muscles are going to use glucose. That's what we just said, right? It's going to go all over your body. And only 20% of those calories, only 20 calories are going to end up in your liver. And they're going to go through this little receptor, and they're going to move. That glucose is going to move through your into your liver cell. And it's only 20 calories. It's not the majority of it right there. So once the glucose gets into the liver cell, what the very first thing that the liver would really love to do is it would just like to store it for later. It's like, look, this is energy. We might need it after a while when we get hungry, and we might run out of energy, so then we can create our own glucose a little bit later, and we're just going to store it. So it's going to go through this process. It's going to have an enzyme. This glucose is going to have an enzyme working on it called glucokinase, which doesn't matter. It's just the glucose. And anytime you hear a kinase, it means it's just going to break something down. And that's going to turn it into this next thing, glucose 6-phosphate. And I'm not going to go a whole lot further than that, but it's going through some steps. It's changing its form inside the liver cell. And that glucose is going to go through a couple of steps, and it's going to end up in glycogen. And that's the storage form of glucose in the cell. Now, we're only talking about 20 calories right now, okay? So it's not that big a deal. So, but there's a few of those that's going to get shunted off, and it's going to go into another process where it moves down, and it's going to turn into fructose 6-phosphate. And that's where you need to just remember that for in a minute. The fructose part, right? So glucose gets turned into that. Then it moves itself down a little bit further through the pathway. And I'm not going through all that, but I want you to know that it's going to go in there and it's going to end up in this form called pyruvate. And pyruvate, just a little bit of pyruvate, that's all, is going to end up being made from those 20 calories that we ate from our sandwich. Most of it is going to go to glycogen for stored later, but we are going to get a little bit of it that goes into pyruvate, and then that's going to go into our mitochondria. And when that goes into our mitochondria, it's going to go through another process, so it could go into this TCA cycle, which is where we're inside the mitochondria, and that's where we make energy. That's where we make what's called ATP. So we're going to send it in there. We're going to turn it into acetyl-CoA. It's going to go through the TCA cycle, and it's going to end up with energy. Okay? That's where you get energy from your sandwich. It's like, how did you get energy? You took your sandwich, and you ate your bread, and you used it because you used a little bit of it in your liver, but you also used those other 80 calories of that bread in all your other cells, and in those other cells, this same process took place. It went to because you got mitochondria in all your cells. So it's going to take a little bit of that glucose, it's going to spread it out really thin all the way across your body, and your body's going to use energy, and now you're going to get energy from your sandwich. You're like, hey, that's the way it works. Okay? So we got this process going on where we make a little bit, we have a little bit of pyruvate, we make a little bit of energy, and things are working pretty good. Now, acetyl-CoA is going to goes to citrate, which goes to isocitrate. So inside this TCA cycle, it's going to move along. And there's a process in there where it can reverse. Isocitrate can come back to citrate. So if we have too many calories, if we have too much energy, what's going to happen is the citrate is going to be pulled out of that cycle in the mitochondria. It's going to be pulled out, and it's going to get converted back into that acetyl-CoA. And then you guys have you gotten to the point yet where you've heard lipoprotein, apolipoprotein B? You've heard that A and B. Have you heard where you need to get your ApoB tested? I did that this last round. I got my ApoB tested, and I finally figured out why that was important in this process. Because I learned about this ApoB. That's now what happens is if we have any extra citrate, then we're going to pull that citrate out, turn it back into acetyl-CoA, go into this another process, and that's going to get turned into VLDL cholesterol, your VLDL, your very low density lipoprotein, that whole thing, your VLDL, okay? And then that's going to get kicked out of the liver cell, and that's going to be stored as a triglyceride. So you get your blood test done, and your triglyceride level is normal. Your triglycerides are 36 or whatever. They're very low. They're less than 150, which if you're not overloading this system, they're going to be even lower. And I showed you my blood work last week, right? So if you might have wondered, how do I get triglycerides in the first place? Why are my triglycerides so high? Why do you have triglycerides in the 200s? What is happening now that is causing this whole thing? Well, if you have normal levels of glucose and you have normal levels, it's what we're always talking about on the show, that we want to balance our insulin, right? We want to keep what are the two things that we want to do? We want to keep our insulin under control, and we want to balance our 6:3 ratio, right? That's what we talk about on our show. The reason that I think that's so important, if I had to get it down to those just two things to do, the reason I say balance the insulin level is because I understand, to a certain extent, I understand all the downstream effects. No, I understand many of the downstream effects of having too much insulin, because if you have too much insulin, that means you had too much glucose and you had too much fructose. I'm going to show you that in just a second. That's what I showed you on that other one, right? If you become insulin resistant, then you're going to have hyperinsulinemia. You're going to have too much insulin in your bloodstream, and that's a problem, right? And that's what it's. So it's also how you get triglycerides, but you only going to get a couple of triglycerides in this scenario. When you only have 20 calories going into your liver, and you're storing most of those as glycogen, and then you're going to go through this process where you're getting the pyruvate into the mitochondria, you just have little bitty pieces of citrate. It's like not hardly any, and so the liver takes it, kicks it out as triglycerides, and then you're fine. Well, then you've got this glucose in your bloodstream. So that glucose is going to flow through your pancreas. Your pancreas is going to release your insulin, and your insulin is going to come over here and dock. It's not even going to dock. It's going to move through this GLUT2 receptor. Insulin is going to come into your liver, and it's going to go through a process, and it's going to get all these little enzymes involved, but it's going to stop the liver from gluconeogenesis, making new glucose. It's going to stop the liver from releasing the glycogen back into or any sort of mechanism at all that's going to decrease this glucose that's going back into your bloodstream. So now your liver is very responsive to insulin. You eat your sandwich, you bring your insulin up, your insulin goes to your liver's responsive. It says, nope, look, you don't need to put any more glucose into the bloodstream. That's why I'm here. I'm here to tell you to stop doing that. You guys that are diabetic, and I've mentioned this before. If you're diabetic, they ask you to check your blood sugar first thing in the morning. Why do they do that? Why you check your blood sugar first thing in the morning? If you wake up in the morning and your blood sugar is 350, first thing in the morning, what happened in the nighttime? What was it that was going on right there? What was going on is that your liver is becoming insulin resistant. So now this mechanism that's taking place inside the liver is not working anymore. So you can't tell your liver to stop making glucose. So now your liver is just dumping this glucose all night long into your bloodstream. It just keeps going and it keeps going. Why? Because it doesn't respond to the insulin anymore. And so what happens? Your blood sugar just keeps going up and keeps going up. Well, what happens when your liver runs out of glycogen? It has to tell the rest of your body, hey, send me your stuff. I need your fatty acids. Send me your fat. And what do you get? You get centripetal obesity. You get visceral fat. You get liver fat in this process right here. That's what happens. And what you get is you get these really skinny arms and really skinny legs, but you get really thick through the middle. And if you get thick through the middle, you're on your way to death. You're moving it. These beer bellies that we see out of guys and all this stuff, this big old central fat that we got going on, it's because we've broken this normal, regular metabolism. Hey, that's the end of the show. I know that it's complicated, and I know listening to it's probably complicated, but it's worth it. So we're just going to keep doing it tomorrow night. It's going to be the same thing. We're just going to pick up where we left off right here, and we're just going to keep moving forward. And I hope by the time we get through this whole thing, you're going to be so dang smart. Nobody in your whole world is ever going to die from diabetes, type 2 diabetes. You guys have a great night.